the forbidden blender.
Once upon a time, a long time ago, there were woods, deep, dark, and twisting. And in those woods were trees, strong, tall, and gnarled. And in those deep, dark, and twisting woods, amidst those strong, tall, gnarled trees, was a door. It was very large, very wide, and made of wood. But its wood didn't seem to come from any of the trees that surrounded it. In fact, the wood didn't seem to come from any tree on the face of the earth. Black and jagged, the door stood. Strange markings had been carved deep into the door. Any light that peeked its way through the tops of the trees never seemed to touch the door. The light seemed to fade and disappear before it had a chance to flash upon the solid, imposing wood of the door. Some of the markings seemed to describe ancient things. Old, dark things seemed to leap out from the stories the carvings told. Tales of sacrifice and pain. Tales of forbidden power and betrayal. Chilling tales. The sun rose and fell countless times while the strange door stood. Nothing ever went in, nothing ever came out. As the years passed, people appeared. They built their little settlements and made a life for themselves and their families. It wasn't too long before they discovered the woods. It wasn't too long before they discovered the trees. It wasn't too long before they discovered the door. The markings frightened them. They didn't know what they were or what they could mean. But they did know that they needed to be protected from whatever lay beyond the door. They dared not destroy the door, but they made a pact among themselves. We do not enter the woods. We do not speak of the door. So it must be for us, our children, and our children's children. And they did just that. Mothers shepherded children away from the looming trees, casting shadows. Fathers chastised children to avoid the twisting paths, overgrown with vegetation. And for a time, all was safe. All was peaceful. But, to the eyes and ears of children, all was quite boring. In the dead of night, two young boys snuck their way past the limits of the village. They crossed the threshold of the woods, making their way through the deep, dark, and twisting paths. They passed by the trees, the gnarled forms casting hideous shadows in the moonlight that barely crept past the branches and leaves of the canopy. They saw the door. The sight slowed their walk. Marks in the ground of generations of curious children littered the small glade preceding the door. They crept past the marks, ever so slowly. They were further than anyone had ever come. No marks in the ground now. No signs of life. Just withered grass, silence, and the door. Another few steps took them to the door. They stood in front of it. They were both terrified, but they had come this far. One boy nudged the other, the braver of the two. Gathering courage, he raised his hand. He held it suspended in the air for a while. Then he knocked on the door. Instantly, the carvings in the door seemed to come alive. They snaked their way up and down, left and right, all over the wizened face of the door. Then a deep noise was heard, almost like something awakening. The boys covered their ears. The noise was so loud. Everything inside their heads told them to run, but they were rooted to the spot. The door started to shake. Small pebbles from the ground started to jostle about. The boys were knocked to the ground from the powerful tremors all around them. Something from beyond the door grew closer. The moon, with its pale light shining down upon the boys, seemed to vanish from the sky. The noise behind the door stopped. Everything was silent once more. But the boys could not bring themselves to move. They stood perfectly still, clinging to the ground from fear. Then the door opened. What looked like a small sliver of black twine pushed its way through the small crack in the door. Then another, and another, and another. They seemed to multiply and spawn more and more of each in an unending cycle. Eventually, something seemed to gain momentum from the other side and burst out the door. A writhing, twisting, black mass of feelers. It quickly surrounded the two small boys. The appendages felt hot and wet against the terrified boy's clammy skin. Do you have any idea what time it is? Don't you have, school tomorrow or something? Where are your parents? A giant, glistening skull, swarming with black tendrils, looked down on them disapprovingly. It saw the look of abject terror in their eyes. You guys all right? The skull's demeanor quickly shifted gears to concern. Everything all right at home? You guys eat enough today? The boys looked at their makeshift shoes and avoided the skull's lack of eyes. I'm not gonna lie, pretty pissed you woke me up. I had finally gotten to sleep after 1,000 years. But if you're hungry or you need someone to talk to, I'm here. The boys looked at each other, then back at the horrifying skull. There was an elongated pause as the skull seemed at a loss of what to say next. You guys like Stranger Things? The boys stared at the skull, confused. A look of dawning comprehension painted the skull's lack of face. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, guys. I exist outside of space and time, so you might not be familiar with streaming shows or electricity at this point in history. So, who wants Pop-Tarts? An errant tentacle slid out from the depths beyond the door and presented the boys with a large white plate laden with warm, frosted pastries. After the boys ate, the skull gave them a stern talk about responsibility and how it relates to respecting other people's space and sleep cycles. He then escorted them home, where he explained to their staring, slack-jawed parents that he wasn't pressing charges. He just wanted them to know that if ever they wanted to hang out somewhere safe after school, they were welcome. They just had to remember to phone ahead so he could clean up.